Hey guys, welcome back to the Hybrid Athlete channel. I am Dr. Paul Rimmer, and today we are going to talk about my lessons learned from my did not finish 100 miles. So this event was the GB ULTRA CHESHIRE 100 mile. A little overview of the overall organisation. Thought it was really well organised. The support crew were amazing. The course was fairly well marked. A few bits of navigation where you're a bit kind of confused, especially when you're tired. And basically, the reason that I got the DNF, and I'll talk about this first before getting into the nitty gritty of the lessons that I've learned, was it was a bit of a foolish mistake really. I just passed about the 90 kilometre mark, was feeling good, and then managed to not put my head torch on in time as it was getting a bit kind of dusky, and thought I'll try and push forward to the next aid station, next checkpoint, which was 102 kilometers. Managed to find a pothole, stepped in it, hit a nice loud popping crunching type delightful sound in my hip at about 92 kilometers, and that was about 9 p.m, so it was still fairly light in British summertime. Tried to hobble on a little bit further, tried to stretch, then tried to adjust my running style, which then started to cause me pain in my knee, and my hip was just getting worse and worse and worse. I soldiered on to about 97 kilometers, which then took me another hour to do about 3 or 4k, and it just wasn't getting any easier. So had a little bit of a shout and a scream at the side of a canal somewhere in and around North Cheshire, heading towards over towards Warrington way. And yeah, so it was just one of those things where it was frustrating. The race was going to plan to that point. But I think the main lesson that I wanted to start with today is to go through some of the positives. So first thing was, I'd had a lot of issues with blisters, and I really felt like using toe socks, properly lubing up my feet. I just used coconut butter and Vaseline, really, like really thicker coconut butter, not like the moisturising stuff. I found that helped really well, and it seems to be an ingredient that's in a lot of kind of anti-chafe balms and things anyway, so that went really well. I'll come back onto this because there's a negative as well off this as well to do with my feet, but I felt like my foot preparation was really good. The toe socks I used were just cheap ones from Decathlon, double layered my socks. I taped my feet, and I actually had no real issues with any new blisters. I've got one problem spot which I need to get sorted, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So overall my feet were good, which was a bit of a concern. Bottom of my feet weren't bruised, a couple of little pinch blisters in around like my heels from just like clipping rocks and things like that and just kind of pinching against my shoe. It's probably more to do with the fit of the shoe as well, but I'll come back onto that shortly. So foot went well, food went great. This time I used a different approach this time. Normally I use a lot of sort of gels and carbohydrate powders, but what I tend to find is that on the longer runs, for some reason they tend to kind of irritate my digestive system a little bit. I tend to find I get quite a lot of GI gut distress. So excuse my calendar there. GI and gut distress. So I kind of decided to just use water and electrolytes as like in fluid form, and that way if I was thirsty and it was a hot day, which it was, it allowed me then to just take on more water without having to panic about, oh god, am I taking on too many carbs, because they tend to go through me and cause digestive issues. So food went really well. I tended to just have like a few snacks at each aid station. The aid stations were between sort of 12 and 20 kilometers apart. The checkpoints, there was one other aid station which was an impromptu one which some guy had set up, which was an absolute lifesaver, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So yeah, even I was taking on food, guts were fine, no issues with the bathroom. Even at halfway I managed to get myself a couple of McDonald's hamburgers and some fries and a Coke and a coffee down me. And yeah, felt absolutely fine. So that's really rare for me. So I definitely think that for these longer events, having sort of slightly slower digesting foods, you don't want them sat in your stomach too long. But I tend to find with me, if my stomach empties quite quickly, that's when I tend to get that funny tummy and that kind of osmotic diarrhea where you get a lot of carbohydrates flushed through your system very quickly, gets into your colon, pulls water, and that's when you need to run to the bathroom. So for me, having more solid foods was definitely something that I will be implementing now as well. I don't think I had any gels or powders all day up until the point at which I wasn't. I didn't feel I needed them. I was getting enough calories in. Next thing that went well was I thought my pacing was really good. It didn't go off too fast. Like I said, obviously after running 90 odd kilometers, your legs are going to start to feel a little bit tired. There's things I do a little bit differently. That's probably a a video for another time once I've just played with a few things and mulled things over. But my pacing was really good. I didn't feel like I went out too hard. You know, in terms of placing in things, I started off really slowly at the back. That was always my intention, kind of worked my way up. I think at one checkpoint I was in around about 30th to 40th place. Was feeling fine, and at the point when I'd left the halfway checkpoint, the 50-mile checkpoint, I was actually catching and overtaking quite a lot of people, and a lot of people had dropped out at that point as well. I think only 30 odd people finished out of the starters. There was 120 odd starters. I think about only a quarter finished. And certainly for me, yes, I could have gone slower and made it. I definitely believe that. But for me, it was about trying to push myself and setting times. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that's why I got hurt or injured, but it's definitely why, I was, what's the word? More prone to probably being a bit more fatigued than I'd like to be and making those poorer decisions around whether to put my headlamp on or push through for a little bit longer to the next checkpoint. My pacing was good. Felt really happy with that. Didn't feel like I over pushed it too much. Felt like I was running the bits I should have been running, and yeah, was fine in the hills. Had no real exhaustion or anything like that as well. And generally speaking, like I said, the course was really well marked, but my navigation was good as well. Had my phone with my GPS on it, had it on my watch, and then I just had my phone attached to, I just had a little small power bank, and that lasted the whole, well, I was at about 16 hours, 17 hours when I dropped, but it lasted that whole distance just fine. Navigation was fine, had no real issues with it. Had a couple of little wobbles where I got stuck the wrong side of a barbed wire fence. So I had to climb over a barbed wire fence rather than face the suffering of running back a few hundred meters, which wasn't the smartest idea in the world to do, but so I ended up standing on this fence and basically like slacklining, balancing on it, tightrope walking on this barbed wire fence, which looking back in hindsight was a very stupid thing to do, but at the time it was better that than go backwards. And I feel as well that just like, you know, I said it before at the start, but it's worth mentioning, like the support and everything at the aid stations was really good. Everyone was there, was really, really helpful at filling up bottles. I caught my finger in a gate in the first couple of checkpoints and like had a little bit of blood bleeding from there as well. But straight away, the support teams there, the people at the aid station, those angels were straight over, sorted me out. And even at one point, there was a long segment just before halfway, and it just was a really hot day, and I'd run out of fluids and I was really struggling, and some gentleman who I think was the husband or partner of one of the people who was on the aid stations had kind of pulled up at the side of this road and just had like some flat coke and water and a few bits of sweets and cookies and things, and that's an absolute godsend. All that last 5k would have been absolute, up until the next aid station would have been absolute hell. So yeah, definitely feel like those are the real positives, things that I've learned. I also think as well, just in terms of the support element, if I was going to do a 100-miler again, you've got to have a support crew with you the whole way around. Like I had a couple of family members drop in and help me and stuff like that, and it was great. But there was certain sections, particularly the one where I got on difficulty on when I'd hurt my hip, where I'm not suggesting it would have prevented it, but I think there's certain points that having people there to stop, to be able to change footwear when you want, rather than being limited to drop bags, especially once you get past that kind of 50-mile mark, I could definitely foresee that being a key determinant in success moving forwards as well. So the support they provided was great, but I think if I was going to have an attempt at a 100-miler, and by the way, a 100-miler that I'm going to do fast rather than just do for the sake of doing 100 miles, then I do think if you are going to push the pace, you are going to, you require a little bit of body work done on you, as it were, anything like that where you need to swap in clothes quickly, swap out footwear, socks, things. You need more than just having your drop bag at sort of 50 mile, and I think the one was about 75 mile. You need to have that support available to you to contact as well. So I know a lot of ultra runners talk about how amazing their support teams are and why they're important. That's why. And my support team was amazing. There was a lot of stuff going on. And again, it's not excuses and reasonings, but my little niece was in hospital. She had a bacterial infection. She's fine now. And then there was a few other things as well, like my normal support crew wasn't available that day. So yeah, it wasn't ideal, but I still wasn't the reason I didn't finish. I just think it would have made it easier to get maybe through that space, or maybe I wouldn't have made the mistake if I'd have had someone meeting me at a point before that to make sure I was going through my checklist. Again, it's not an excuse, but I just think if you're going to push the pace on these things, you do need an amazing support crew. So let's talk about the negatives. I'm going to talk about my feet a little bit. Again, even that was a positive. So basically, imagine I've got my feet. On my right foot, I have one toe that comes slightly underneath, and it keeps blistering really horrifically on the top of my toenail. If you haven't seen the pictures, I won't post them on here because they're grim, but they're on my Instagram. which is at Dr. P Performance. I posted it in the link below. And it's sort of like had to drain it and loads of fluid will come out. And it's a recurrent issue now. The toenail's basically gone. But the only thing I can think of is it's pulled underneath. So I'm going to go and see my toes being pulled underneath and it's rubbing. So I thought it was the outside of my shoe that was causing it, but I've got a shoe with a much wider toe box now. So I use the Topo Mountain Racer 2. I'm going to do a review on them at some point. Bit of a mixed bag. I thought they held up really well in terms of like their grip was good, their comfort was fine, they were good enough, like easy enough ride on like kind of harder roads and the soft enough ride, on the harder roads and the canal toe paths. I just feel like the fit and the heel grip wasn't there as well, so I've got a couple of like sore blisters around the outside of my heels, which I never normally get when I've run in any other running shoes before. Also, the durability on them not particularly great. Not that these ones here. I've got my Nike Pegasus Trail 3s. These are much comfier, by the way, but they're not as roomy in the toe box. But this area here on the top hose has started to like fray. I've not got them here at the moment. I left them at my folks' house. So yeah, I thought they were a good trainer, but I just think I was a little bit disappointed with. Maybe it's just shape of my feet, but for a wider toe box shoe, that was great. So the front of the foot was great. The toe box was great. Grip was great. Comfort, generally speaking, in terms of the midsole cushioning and stuff, was great. But I was just a little bit like, the lockdown at the laces was a little bit uncomfortable as well. The tongue's very thin, not very padded, and so it was. They're not great, and I just think the durability on them isn't the best really. I've only had a couple of long runs in them. And I think I'm probably going to switch back. I'm going to have a little try with the new Pegasus Trail 4s, but in a size up, because now I think my toe issue isn't the tightness of the fit of the foot, even though my feet are wide. That I think it is this sort of little toe issue. And again, now I've got my foot lube and my foot lube solution sorted, my anti-chafe solutions sorted, then I'm going to have a little jump back to the Pegasus Trail 4s. So I've run in the Trail 3s before, and they were great, but I think I went a half size too low. Negatives, let's talk about hydration. Typically speaking, I thought my hydration was good, but I just think there was too much gap between aid stations, which is where you need to have that extra support. I only had two 600 milliliter flasks with me, 1.2 litres. So for some of the longer sections, it was just too little. My electrolytes were good though. Didn't have any issues with cramping or any real tightness and stuff, which was really happy. Yeah, your legs get fatigued and tired and heavy, but there was no severe cramping or anything like that as well. Not even in the hilly sections. So I just was a little bit disappointed with myself really about not taking on a little bit of extra water when I should have done. And like I said, that guy at that aid station absolutely saved my life, because that could have gone badly. My head torch situation, my head torch was great. I used a Petzl. I've got a little sticker here from it that I've just stuck on my lamp at the clinic. I used a Petzl head torch. Can't remember which model it is now off the top of my head, but it was my own stupidity of not putting the headlight on early enough that caused the problem. It may not have prevented it, but basically I was coming around the corner, there was a shadow off a wall, covered a pothole, and I just thought it was shadow, stepped in it, and that's what the issue was. And so I think the final take-home messages really for me really, and a few things that I really need to build for next time, is one, is making sure that like my body's 100% healthy going in. It was pretty healthy. It's just that in terms of foot health and stuff as well, I need to make sure that's at 100%. Second thing really would be making sure that I've got my pit crew and support crew with me, and having a good support crew, particularly in terms of pacing and for those night shifts as well. The days are fine, it's when it gets nighttime, it's a problem. I broke one of my rules actually. I usually have a 70 to 75% rule, so I generally don't progress a distance or race at a distance or an event, or I never recommend it to a client unless I've covered 70 to 75% of that distance previously. You know, you can make up the last 25 to 30% off sheer enthusiasm if you need to, but you need to have that confidence in yourself now as well. So I'm supposed to have another 100k race in about 5 weeks time, but again, a lot's going to depend on my hip and knee, because it still isn't great. I've tried to do some training on that, and it's not gone well, but we'll see how it goes in the next week or so. And then I broke my 70 to 75% rule. So typically speaking, I'd want to have done at least 100 and 110k trial run this year before building up to the 100 miler, which I didn't do. So again, I'll move forward with that and remind myself of that in my training programming, that I'm not invincible. And then the final thing really would be, in terms of the course recce, I think if you're going to do a 100 mile, particularly if you've not done one before, it's understanding the whole of the course. So I'd done a good recce on the first sort of 80-90k, knew what I was getting into. But I think psychologically, when you know where things are, you know what's coming up next, you know how far things are, you don't start telling yourself these stories about how far away the next checkpoint is, or you're trying to run the terrain, but you don't know what the terrain is, and then sometimes it can become frustrating because it doesn't meet your expectations. So knowing when to push and push on with the pace and back off a little bit would be useful as well. But apart from that, like, I do feel like, after last year where I ended up with a stress fracture at 85 miles and had to pull out, I didn't DNF that. It was a 24-hour loop race and we got pulled off the course for 4 hours because of thunderstorms. And any other race I've DNF'd is because, that's just one other, was because I just chose to leave the course because it was a training run and I got it far enough round because I was supporting a client that I then just decided to just drop off the course. So I feel the overriding emotion I've got right now is one of disappointment. I'm proud of, I'm more disappointed than I am proud because I don't feel like physically I was in a bad enough place to stop. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like last time when I couldn't eat and my stomach had rebelled on me and I was having hallucinations borderline and I was in absolute agony. It wasn't like that, but it was just when I was there and I realized I said I had 67, 68 kilometers to go and my body wasn't doing it, but I felt physically fine in terms of like I had the capacity to get to the end physically. Like, it wasn't like my muscles were fatigued, I wasn't cramping, it wasn't blisters, even though I do have that toe issue. It wasn't anything which was like, at that time, was like chronically creeping up on me. It was just that one incident. So I think the overriding emotion is disappointment, but also disappointment and then a little bit of frustration in there for obvious reasons. But the main priority now is to get myself fit, healthy and strong, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next week or so and how my body's going to recover to see if I can do that 100 kilometer. I've got a couple of clients doing that race as well, so I might just go and be supportive there. I could just go and walk it and see how it goes and just do the 100k really gently over like 24 hours and just plod along and have a nice day. But to be honest, like, what's the point? How does that add in with my goals for the rest of the year, which is now onto strength season? So that's what I'm going to talk about in my next training video, is what I'm doing now. I tried to get back to doing a little bit of running this week, but like I said, the body says no. But at least I can do something. So if I can get back running in the next week or so, by maybe the 18th or 19th of June, pain-free, then I'll have a think about the 100k. But if not, then I'm going to knock it on the head, focus on recovering this month, getting my strength back. And then we go into muscle building season. So you see the other side of the hybrid athlete journey, when I'm going to focus on putting on some serious size. So I'm going to talk about that in my next video, about what the goals are over the next few months. Back to that later. Anyway, guys, cheers for tuning in. Hopefully that's been useful to you, and I'll speak to you all soon. I'll come back with some more educational content in the not too distant future. Keep an eye out for that. Please give me a like and a subscribe. Peace.